I'm Naomi Klein, and as some of you know, I have a doppelganger. A person who does many extreme things that cause strangers to chastise me or thank me or express their pity for me. I used to be horrified by this, but then something happened that I didn't expect. I got interested in what it means to have a doppelganger. So I decided to follow my doppelganger to a place I've come to think of as the mirror world.
Hey folks, my name is Mo Amir and this is VANCOLOUR, British Columbia's bona fide culture and politics TV talk show. Tonight we take a trip into the mirror world with one of the most influential public intellectuals of our time. Her seminal work, No Logo, became the manifesto for the anti-globalization movement, and her revelatory expose of free market capitalism, the Shock Doctrine, detailed how crises around the world are exploited in order to implement unpopular economic policies. But her new book, Doppelganger, may be my personal favorite. It's a weird, wild ride that starts with her experience of being confused with another high-profile but profoundly opposite social critic to explore the rise of conspiracy theories. An award-winning journalist and columnist for The Guardian, New York Times best-selling author, and a tenured professor at the University of British Columbia, among so many other hats that she wears. She is Naomi Klein. Naomi, what an honor.
Thank you, Mo. That's lovely. Thank you for that introduction.
Oh, absolutely. Now, here's the thing. I am such a fan. Your work has been so influential in my life through my undergraduate degree, through my graduate degree, really shaped the way how I looked at the world. And then I see you palling around with Trump campaign advisor Steve Bannon. You're co-hosting podcasts. You're hanging out with Tucker Carlson. What happened to you, Naomi?
I'm sorry to disappoint you so much. Yes, many people have asked themselves that question.
And it's not you, to be clear.
With some profanity in the question. Whatever happened to. So yes, you're referencing the fact that I have a doppelganger.
You do. The other Naomi.
So that was not me with Steve Bannon or Tucker Carlson. I never claimed that vaccinated people shed onto unvaccinated people and that affected their fertility. Not true. But yeah, a lot of people get me confused. I don't know, Naomis who write books, sort of big idea books. She wrote The Beauty Myth, which came out when I was an undergraduate. Was sort of a big deal in the Democratic Party. She advised Al Gore. So it was pretty shocking to a lot of people when she changed. It kind of became a doppelganger of herself during COVID.
Yeah.
She wasn't the only one. I think we all know people who kind of fell down the rabbit hole. And there were all these kind of cross-political signals of people who we used to think of as being progressive, and suddenly they're voting for the People's Party, or, we all know those stories, right? You've got that yoga instructor who's suddenly QAnon.
I have a few of those,
right? So in the book, I decided to use my own doppelganger as a case study for the way in which it's kind of a mass derangement that happened during the pandemic and carries through certainly to today.
And I do want to get into that, but before we do, let's talk about the other Naomi.
Sure.
Let's talk about Naomi Wolf.
Yeah.
Obviously, you share a name. You had partners, both named Avi. You still do.
For a little while. Yeah. She's now with someone named Brian.
She's with someone else.
No longer have that problem.
But she was like the standard bearer for 90s feminism. She was very active in the Occupy Wall Street movement. And so I could understand some of the mistaken identity that occurred.
Yeah.
Was this something that really dogged your professional career, or was it only once she kind of turned to this anti-vax, right-wing reactionary persona that she became?
So I just want to say, first of all, this happens to a lot of us. It's not that unique that we get confused with other people who sort of look like us online. I think it happens to racialized people.
You even got confused for Naomi Campbell. So it happens to you a lot.
There is something about the name Naomi where it's just rare enough that the first Naomi you hear about becomes like the universal Naomi. But it is true that I'd had the experience, particularly in the UK, where would have like TV presenters be like, coming up next, an interview with Naomi Campbell. And I'd have to apologize. I'm like, I'm so sorry to disappoint you. It's just me, but so, that is obviously not identity confusion. That's just like a little glitch in something about the name. But with Wolf, it was really not confusion, but conflation. Like people were really, really mixing us up. And maybe it's because we're both Jewish and publish these nonfiction books. I don't know what it is, but I decided that it was. So you were asking, you want to know more about her? Or what?
Well, let's just get into her being your white rabbit into the mirror world. How would you explain the mirror world to someone who hasn't read your book yet?
Sure. And it did happen more during COVID because I think for a variety of reasons. One, we were all spending way too much time online. Yeah. But also, it used to be that I think we had clearer lanes. She was writing about women and gender and I was writing about capitalism and crises and climate change. And during COVID, she was really making an argument that was kind of like a doppelganger of the argument I make in the Shock Doctrine, which is that during times of crisis, we often have corporations and politicians try to smuggle through policies that they wouldn't be able to get through.
Exploiting
crises. Now, I don't make the argument that they create the crises in order to exploit them, but during COVID, I'm sure you heard people in what I call the mirror world talk about how this was all a plandemic, right?
Right. Okay.
And that maybe it was all that Bill Gates wanted to depopulate the earth. And it was some plot with the World Economic Forum and the Chinese Communist Party. And so it was like, I write in the book, it was as if someone had taken my ideas and like put them in one of those like Vitamix blenders and added like a bunch of tropical fruit and then fed the thought puree to Tucker Carlson, who nodded vehemently.
Right. And even a lot of her ideas were nonsensical or at least inconsistent in logic, right? So on one hand, it was this planned thing by, nefarious actors. But then on the other hand, it wasn't actually that serious in terms of how sick you could get, right?
Yeah, which is why I don't call her and the people she pals around with conspiracy theorists.
Okay.
Just because I'm a fan of theory. I think it's important to have a good theory. And this is, I call them conspiracy influencers because they're moving around from sort of hot topic to hot topic. So at first, it's the virus itself is a bioweapon. But then when it's all about mask mandates, it's like, it's just a cold. What are you worried about? And it's like, well, I thought it was a bioweapon. Surely I shouldn't try to avoid it, So there are big contradictions. But the pattern is it's really whatever's in the news, like whatever's going to get you the clicks. It's clout chasing. And that's, I think, helpful to distinguish between somebody who actually has a theory of how the world works.
Yeah. So then in trying to make sense of the mirror world and understanding it, again, how do we define it? Like, is it this idea of someone who looks to be serious but actually isn't once you peel back the layers? How would you describe it?
Well, I use this term to describe the way a lot of people have sort of have cut ties with what I would recognize as a shared reality and are now living in a sort of parallel infrastructure where, like, if you get kicked off Twitter, then you just join Getter. And if you get kicked off YouTube, you just join Parler. So in many ways, it's a mirror world in that it has exact replica institutions and platforms. And they're very large and they're getting larger. Often, like when she was kicked off Twitter, she's now back, but when she was kicked off Twitter, like a lot of the people who I know were acting as if she'd been deleted from planet Earth. But because I followed her down that rabbit hole and I was sort of interested in what she was doing, it was clear to me that she was reaching more people than she had, in decades.
Right.
So there's a mirror infrastructure, but there are also mirror arguments. Any argument on this side of the glass, there is an exact replica mirror argument over there.
Fascinating. But somewhat detached from reality.
Yes. But we also, on this side of the glass, one of the problems is that we become very reactive. So if an issue gets traction over there, then we will not talk about it over here, right? So, for instance, they were focused on COVID origins, and then that became kind of an unsayable subject of debate among, liberal, polite society. Right. And then it turns out, well, maybe that was worth investigating, right? We don't actually know whether it came from a lab or it came from a wet market. And why is that such a partisan question to ask? Like, why don't we look into it? So there are all kinds of ways that we react to one another in this kind of mirror dance.
I got to ask you about conspiracy theories, in particular, the COVID-19 pandemic, because I feel like, as you alluded to, it broke a lot of people whose whole personality is just about COVID, either the freedom folks or the COVID zero folks. I've seen people, even today, this is all they want to talk about. They're kind of obsessed with it. What was it about COVID-19 that quote unquote broke us?
Well, I think humans are social beings. And we make ourselves in conversation with one another. I don't think we're really built for isolation. And we were confronting an airborne virus that we didn't understand. And we were terrified. And we weren't able to engage in sense making with one another. So we went online.
Oh, and that was our first mistake.
Well, this is, first I just want to say, I've spent time in a lot of different contexts under extreme stress because to write the Shock Doctrine, I visited places that had been struck by tsunamis and hurricanes and wars. And conspiracies always surge during times when people are trying to make sense of something that doesn't seem to make sense, that they've never experienced before, especially if it's being exploited by predatory interests, right? So then they try to make sense of it. Like, well, is it possible that somebody caused this in order to take advantage, or take my home and my land? What was different about COVID is not that there were conspiracies surging. It's that we live in an attention economy now, and the people who were putting out the wildest conspiracy claims got the traffic, got the clicks in that moment when we all went online to try to find some simulation of community, friendships, but also to make sense of where we were. Science takes time, right? I mean, if you're confronting a novel virus, credible scientists are going to take their time before they are able to share their findings with you. And that's just not true of conspiracy influencers. They're just going to make stuff up, and they're going to get the clicks, and they're going to monetize it. So it's interesting what you say, that, there people are still obsessed with it. I think there are some people who still are. I think that we're also in this weird stage where people who got that kind of lift off, that magic carpet ride from COVID, are looking for where they're going to get the lift off next, right? It's like, am I going to get it from transphobia? Am I going to get it from climate change denial? Is
that why we see the linkages of, when those folks have the banners hanging off the highway, it's like anti-vax stuff and then anti-trans stuff as well, right? Things that seem very unrelated. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of trying to figure out because people got a sense of community, they got a sense of mission. If you think about the trucker convoy, right? And that's sort of like the bouncy castles, and that like, if you were in the in group, you were having the time of your life. If you were in the out group and wearing a mask walking by, you certainly were not, especially if you're a non-white person.
And is this one of the things that differentiates the COVID-19 pandemic from, let's say, 9/11? Because I remember when you were on tour for the Shock Doctrine, the truther movement at that time, 2007, 2008, was really popular. And I remember sitting in a book talk that you were doing, and there was a truther that came up and said, what about 9/11 and what really happened? And yet that movement didn't seem to really take off in the same way that the COVID-19 truthers or the anti-vaxxers have taken off.
I think that is the big difference. Is that was pre-attention economy. 2007, that was the year of the iPhone, pre-Facebook, pre-Twitter. So there wasn't that same ability. But when someone, it's so interesting to me that you remember that, because I do remember it was always like the first person up to the mic. Why won't you admit that 9/11?
And then a collective groan from the rest of us. I remember that. Yeah.
And what I would say was, I've just given a talk about how we were led into a war based on lies, that hundreds of thousands of Iraqis have died. Why isn't that enough for you? Like, why are you moving the horizon of outrage beyond what we actually can prove, right? And I feel the same way. And I think it's really important to understand about conspiracy culture today. Like, there's plenty of reasons to be mad at Bill Gates without making anything up.
Sure.
You don't need to claim that he's trying to track us with vaccines. How about the fact that he was working with drug companies to keep the vaccines patented in ways that prevented vaccines from reaching the global south? there's you don't need to make anything up about people exploiting COVID, to enrich themselves.
And is that part of the problem, that a lot of people that otherwise perhaps would have been critical of things like big pharma, big tech, or billionaires inflating their net value or net worth, they seem to be kind of missing, and that void seemed to be taken by these reactionaries, this conspiracy culture, as you say. Was that really part of the issue?
Well, I do think, and this is what I mean by the reactivity, right? So once people in the mirror world started talking about Bill Gates and being very, very anti-vax, then the line on much of the left, and certainly in liberals, was roll up your sleeve and get your vaccine and just follow the mandates. And we didn't question, well, why are we putting everything onto these vaccines and vaccine verification apps? Why don't we have more ambitious demands, like lift the patents on the vaccines, hire more teachers and nurses, really invest in our social infrastructure, make sure that every classroom has good air and air filtration.
Right. We were still so focused on the individual rather than these collective systems.
Exactly. Yeah. And we were just very reactive. So it was like whatever they're against, we're for, and vice versa. So yeah, that's what I mean. Like, it's not just about them. Doppelgangers in movies and films, like, you think you're going after your other self, but it ends up being a mirror of something that you don't want to look at about yourself.
Right.
And I found that about
now,
my travels.
Is the danger with conspiracy culture that instead of focusing on systems, they really want to focus on specific people to blame? And the biggest conspiracy of all of them is blaming Jewish people, and so that is
the oldest and most persistent.
Right? Yeah. So is that ultimately the problem with conspiracy culture, is instead of looking at systems and how things operate, they really just they want someone to blame?
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's why, I'm so troubled by this urge to move the horizon somewhere where we can't prove it, right? It's just some idea that there's this nefarious plot, this room somewhere where everybody's plotting against you, as opposed to this is a system doing what it was designed to do. We live in a system that rewards profit making. It's the ultimate good within the logic of capitalism. So if you can exploit a crisis to get rich, that's why people are doing it, not because they're whatever people are claiming is going on, with adrenochrome and kids.
Right,
I mean, I don't want to overplay it.
So in a conversation about reality and dissolving reality, I feel like the internet and social media in particular is like augmented reality. It's still somewhat in reality, and we're communicating with each other through screens, but there is a bit of a performative aspect of how we view reality. Where I see the next step going is artificial intelligence, where we don't even know if operations or communications are actually happening with a real individual. Yeah. They might be happening with a machine. Yeah. So is this, in terms of just in general, is AI and artificial intelligence an existential threat to humanity?
Well, it's definitely a threat to our ability to know who and what we can trust. I think it's definitely a threat to a lot of people's jobs. And I don't love the way tech companies have framed this in this sort of Terminator way, where once again, they're moving the horizon of outrage off into some is it going to kill us all? Are the machines going to turn on us?
But isn't it the ultimate doppelganger that way?
It is the ultimate doppelganger, but it's not speculative. Like right now, we have a toxic information sphere where we do not know, whether each other are real. We don't know what we can believe. We don't have any shared reality. We're having conversations not about shared differing interpretations of reality, but who is in a simulation and who is in reality.
Right.
That's a big deal. And in a context like that, where we already have misinformation spreading virally, to introduce AI and deep fakes, and the idea that I could go online and there could be somebody who looks and sounds very much like you, but is not you.
Yeah.
And is taking your voice and is taking your face.
How do I know if this Drake song is actually Drake?
I mean, that is just going to make what we've been talking about, the spread of conspiracy culture, so much worse, and it already is. And when you mix in, international conflict and war, and governments, having a vested interest in this, we've got a big old mess on our hands. But yeah, we're all going to have doppelgangers of ourselves out there soon.
So we're not going to end the show on a positive note. Can you give me something about AI or the impending technology to maybe fall asleep at night thinking, oh, it's not all lost?
I do think it is good that actors and screenwriters and different artists are out there saying, this is theft, actually. Why should you be allowed to train these machines on our work, on our faces, on our voices? And this is a really important sphere of struggle. I know it can seem a little bit, maybe it seems too soft, it's cultural, but I think a lot depends on whether or not we know whether we can trust one another.
Are we in another situation similar to social media where government is playing catch up? Like, I feel like only now government is starting to implement rules and regulations. And with AI, they should try to be as proactive as possible. I know they're always going to be behind, but it just feels like government is not taking the threat seriously.
No, and I think part of the reason why they're not is because it's being framed as in geopolitical terms, like if you don't let us do this, then China will get ahead of us, right. and then it's like, okay, well, China and we're doing it, and then it's just a wonderful gift to the same 5 tech companies.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
We get to mine us.
Naomi, this has been an honor, a privilege, a pleasure. So thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Mo.
And congratulations on a very successful book tour, by the way.
Thank you. I'm home. I'm happy to be home.
Absolutely. Thank you. Folks, that's our show. Thank you, of course, to our very special guest tonight, Naomi Klein, for all of her time tonight. Be sure to pick up her book, Doppelganger, A Trip into the Mirror World. Find it at your local bookstore. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. For now, though, this is VANCOLOUR, and I'm Mo Amir telling you that in a province where you can be anything, be colorful. Peace.